Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to the All In Crypto podcast. Today, I am delighted to be joined by Vandall Al-Jarrara, who is the co-founder of Black Swan Capitalist. Of course, he is an investor and strategist when it comes to the markets. And I'm super excited to dive into some of the conversations we're going to be having today. So welcome on board, Vandall. How are you?
Doing great. Thank you for having me on. I commend you for the work you do. I just want to say you have a brilliant channel, brilliant mind, and the perspectives you put out there are just phenomenal. So just please keep that up. You're doing a great job. I love your channel.
Thank you very much. And likewise, you know, there's a number of things that we're going to get into that really attracted me to you. And ultimately, I think we have very similar views on a lot of the things that people are perhaps missing when it relates to this industry as a whole and the bigger picture of what's really happening here that I really want to get into. But with all my guests, I really like to start off with a little bit about themselves. You know, there's an eclectic group of us here in the cryptocurrency space. My background's in dentistry. Some of the backgrounds that we found and how they've now ended up in crypto are stories on themselves. But what's your sort of background, Vandall? How did you find yourself in this industry?
Yeah, of course. So before in 2020, I was working as an executive assistant to a CFO, a high-profile individual for an oil and gas company. I also was an executive assistant to a CEO for Energy Renewables Inc., a company based out of the UAE and Houston, Texas. So I was working very closely with certain individuals that I spent some time with, and they've been very generous with their wisdom and knowledge. So I learned a lot along the way, and really it's things you can't learn in school. So I'm very grateful for that. But prior to that, I was in banking with Bank of America and then International Bank of Commerce, IBC, as a banker. And my crypto journey actually started around 2019. I was introduced to Bitcoin and Ethereum, just cryptocurrency in general. I heard about it many years ago, but never took an interest in it. Initially, I thought it was a scam and got introduced to it, did some digging, some research, understood that this is here to stay and it's going somewhere and it's just the infancy stages. So I decided to, make some investments, really understand it more, understand how it ties into the traditional monetary system and the banking system and how it's evolving. And that became my passion alongside my brother. And in 2020, we created the Black Swan Capitalist company and YouTube channel. And ever since then, we've been discussing cryptocurrency, investing, financial markets, the monetary system, etc. And it's evolved over time, but that's kind of the background leading me to crypto. So I have a background in banking and finance and business, and just used a lot of my experience to kind of understand this new asset class and how it ties into everything.
Yeah, and it does tie into everything, which I'm sure we're going to be getting into. The experience that you have with the traditional financial system, one thing that we're finding now is we're seeing a lot of people jumping from traditional finance to crypto as almost like a lifeboat, if you will, or a kind of the newer thing, just like we saw on the dawn of the internet, a lot of people moving towards the tech sector because, of course, technology, the internet specifically, has really revolutionized the financial sector. Crypto is very much on a similar journey, and actually the internet of value, I think, really is upon us, and we're going to get into some of the players that are going to be involved in that. With your experience in the traditional financial sector, there has to have been a kind of recognition, I guess, that there was or is, definitely is, problems with it. And actually, perhaps you could have paired what distributed ledger technology brings to the table and the solving of some of those problems. Is that something that perhaps, was that a light bulb moment? Was that something that you went through? Can you talk us through that?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So in traditional banking, first of all, the system is outdated. And historically, all systems, empires, economies, currencies come to an end at some point. And the banking system is no different. So the current banking system is outdated for multiple reasons, but primarily because it's inefficient when we talk about moving value, moving money, whether it's sending, receiving money, and the broader market and how it deals with moving value. So what distributed ledger technology and blockchain technology bring to the table is the removing of that friction, the expenses involved, the inefficiencies, the delays from days to seconds, from countless dollars and unneeded additional funding to just fractions of a penny. So it's more efficient in the broader scheme of things, not just from a user standpoint, from peer to peer, but even from institution to institution. So, for example, the banking system, the way it works is there are nostro vostro accounts, pre-funded accounts. So when you send money from, let's say you're sending it to your brother, it looks like they're receiving it instantly on one end, but in reality, it's pre-funded. So there are multiple middlemen and accounts that are called, they're pre-funded accounts, they're nostro vostro accounts, and they have pre-funded capital to allow that movement of money and for the receiver to receive it and see it on the other end. But it's inefficient because it holds a lot of capital in the system in these pre-funded accounts that could be, flourishing and doing other things in the economy. It's really a waste of money. And that's the friction in the payment system, in the banking system now. So what crypto and digital assets do in blockchain technology is it completely removes that friction. And it doesn't, for example, Ripple, XRP doesn't replace the dollar, but they're replacing an outdated remittance and payment system, essentially. That's what's taking place right now. It's an evolution of the monetary and financial system, the banking system. It's an evolution of that. And as we've seen historically, all systems and they do come to an end at some point because of innovation, disruption, and technology. So this is just a natural evolution taking place. And it happens to be artificial intelligence, robotics, and blockchain technology and crypto.
There's this kind of singularity, I guess you could call it, both financially and kind of technologically, that is coming, and all these technologies seem to kind of work off of one another into this big, perhaps global system that's facing us. And that's one thing that attracted me to your channel, is you seem to have a really good understanding of the bigger picture. There's a lot we can touch on off of all of that. I think in layman's terms, one way I always like to look at it is it's kind of like people evolving from sending letters to emails. In that internet of value, it's a similar thing kind of going on. It's always good to throw because what we're talking about here is some quite high level stuff, but I'll try and keep it as layman as possible. And that's really what you want to think about this technology doing. And that's really brilliantly going to bring me on to your thoughts on this industry, really as a whole, starting with Bitcoin. I'm sure, like many of us, we all stumble upon Bitcoin. We start to read about it and kind of get initially sold this idea of it being this libertarian dream. The likes of what Frederick Hayek or Milton Friedman, there's clips about them all over the internet talking about an e-money that would disrupt central banking. But with Bitcoin, it doesn't seem like Bitcoin is that technology. Maybe it plays a role of a store of value that you can transact, but it's certainly not going to revolutionize the banking system, or I believe be used as a peer-to-peer payment. What are your thoughts on Bitcoin, which is a great place for us to start before we go into where we're at today and some of the cryptos that we think are going to be impactful in this new system? What's your thoughts on Bitcoin? You would have came into this space, Bitcoin probably quite likely. What are your thoughts on what's going on here with Bitcoin?
Yeah, so I don't think Bitcoin was initially created to transmit value. I don't think it was designed for that. Hence why there are certain limitations in place, and even more superior technologies that exist currently. Yet, interestingly, they try to lure the masses and uninformed retail investors into Bitcoin, which actually makes me very suspicious because historically, in the world of business and mainstream media, typically they don't want you to find the gem in the rough. They'll usually, show it to you once it's said and done. And this applies to technologies in the past. This applies to equity in companies. They did the same thing with the internet, Google, Amazon. I mean, during the internet, they were telling people in newspapers and on CNN, it's a scam, it's a trend, it's a fad. And these were literally considered the experts that were saying these things. Yeah, they were all wrong. Now, the question is, from a logical standpoint, I think some of them knew, they're just not allowed to, in the world of business, sometimes there's strategic misdirection and non-disclosure agreements where you can't divulge all the information for certain reasons. It could be various reasons. But the point is, I don't think Bitcoin was designed to be a currency for moving value. I don't think it was designed for that. I do believe, and I always like to look at the timing of when events take place. I think this is very overlooked, but very important, and it says a lot. And what I've learned, through experience is oftentimes the truth lies in not what's being said, but usually what's unsaid. So interestingly, with Bitcoin, just a brief overview here. In 2008, we had the financial crisis in the United States and the sovereign debt crisis, etc. Interestingly, right after that, and 1 year later, in 2009, Bitcoin emerged. If you actually look at all the events that took place in 2009, there are multiple big events that didn't get the world's attention because they weren't meant to, but it was out there and it was happening. So in 2009, when Bitcoin was created, a few other things happened that are extremely significant. The United Nations held a panel about and discussing a new global reserve currency. This is public information. Anybody could verify it. This happened in 2009 with the United Nations. And of course, it wasn't publicly broadcasted, but it was taking place, and it's verifiable. In 2009, and this was when Bitcoin was created. Additionally, in 2009, this is when all central banks around the world agreed to reset interest rates to near zero. So this was a jubilee in itself. It was an interest rate jubilee. It was a reset. So that happened in 2009. And of course, that's when Bitcoin was created. Now, it's very interesting because Bitcoin was extremely under the radar and really didn't get any momentum until, a couple of years later. That's when it started getting attention. So just not to, drift off too much here, but in essence, it seems to me that Bitcoin was designed to lure in retail, and it was a very strategic narrative painted around it to convince, technologists and investors and just people in general over time that it's this libertarian movement that will allow you to operate outside of the traditional system. But that's very far from the truth, because as you could see, BlackRock, some big institutions and government entities, and some whales, and you don't know who those whales are. They could be government entities or just an individual billionaire oligarch, but these are the biggest holders of Bitcoin. And what's interesting there is this is a perfect way to fully control something. So one can consider the system decentralized, but in reality, when you zoom out, it's a decentralized in a centralized system because you have these few entities that hold the majority of it. So how is that decentralized in the grand scheme of things? The
and
illusion is
control
decentralized.
all the on and off ramps. Even though it's
Absolutely.
I love what you say. Just a quick interruption there. It's a decentralized system
Please.
within a centralized world, a controlled world
Exactly.
by the international banking cartel. But please continue.
Exactly.
This is brilliant.
Oh, absolutely. That's exactly where I was going with it. So it's really an illusion, and it was disguised as a libertarian movement to give people that sense of being outside the system. And interestingly, you probably know this in the world of business and just in general, but contrarians usually are the most successful in all aspects of life. And it's not just because they're going the opposite way because everybody's going one other way. It's because they go the opposite way because they find something wrong in the way the majority are thinking. Okay. It's not just to go the opposite way just because. There's a very strategical reason behind it. And it's usually because the masses, all right, the majority of people have, they're thinking about something or looking at something in a very wrong way. There's something wrong with the way they're looking at something and how they identify it. So, from a contrarian perspective, I'm doing the complete opposite. And yes, the majority of investors that are just getting introduced to the space, they're getting involved in Bitcoin. That's the one that has the most spotlight on it. That's the first one to pave the way for crypto. That's the one that has a narrative built around it that you'll be outside the system. It's a store of value. And it's the first one that will continue to rise forever until it hits past $1 million. All these narratives. And whether the narratives are rooted in truth or not is besides the point. The fact is, narratives are taught in behavioral economics. Okay. Narratives are designed to exploit people's fear, emotions, grief, greed. And the media that are controlled by five conglomerates actually are the same people on Wall Street that are in bed with the government. And whatever narratives you're hearing, that's by design, and it's because they want you to hear the narrative. So a contrarian would absolutely do the opposite of what the narrative is telling you to do. And the narrative seems to be for the longest time, buy Bitcoin, it's a store of value, and it's not going anywhere. But from a fundamental and utility aspect, it really doesn't do anything. And this is another point, not to get off topic here, but if all transactions halted on Bitcoin on the network, the value would drop to zero because it's based on transactions taking place on the network. So this is a whole other topic, but my point is, it's Bitcoin, in my opinion, is designed to lure in the general population into crypto. And a very good way to entice people is to make them believe that it's going to make you rich. And the truth is, even if you invest in Bitcoin, if it does a 2x, which is 2 times the current price, first of all, you're not going to get rich. Second of all, you're not going to make a fortune unless you actually own tons of Bitcoin, because most people don't even have more than $4,000 in their savings account. And one Bitcoin costs approximately a little over $100,000. So it seems like it's a good way to, multiply your wealth, at least in the short term, if you are very wealthy. If you could buy multiple Bitcoin. But from a investment perspective, 2x or even a 10x is easily done in a bull market with any altcoin, even a meme coin. So, but they still try to get people into Bitcoin. It's a very strong narrative that's being pushed. And Michael Saylor, the head of MicroStrategy, it's interesting because as we talked about how they control the media, and this is a fact, not an opinion, they control the narratives, and they give Michael Saylor a very heavy spotlight on some of these business channels and radio stations and media channels. And if they give you the spotlight all the time, there's definitely an agenda there.
Yeah. Do you know? And this is again why I was so excited about having you on, because we're going to hopefully during the course of this conversation try and work out as best as possible, not completely because we'd need days to talk about all of this, what the real agenda and intent behind all of this is. I think when you look at how we ended up with a central bank, Everyone knows the story of Jack Lyle. They know obviously the Federal Reserve Act, but they don't know that before that there was was it Archibald bill? There was a bill before that essentially came on the back end of a crisis, a banking crisis, when you had private banks. Essentially, it wasn't all as it is today and centralized. You had an individual could own a bank. They collapsed those banks, Heinz, Knickerbocker, and then they said, okay, we need to do something about this. Kind of similar to, so this is your 2008 moment in my head. And then what they did was try and put through one bill. They said, okay, the people rejected it because they said Wall Street's too involved in this. And then they said, okay, to take the power away from Wall Street, we're going to give it to the people through a central bank. And ultimately, the very same people, your JP Morgans and everybody, ended up there. So that is a historical problem reaction solution that's led to a new financial system that I think Bitcoin today is echoing. 2008 financial crisis. White paper was released on Halloween 2008. Genesis block 2009 January with the snippet. It was a UK chancellor on the brink of second round of bailouts. The coincidences, and in life, I'm sure me and you have realized that when there's too many coincidences, it's probably not a coincidence. And I think the ushering in of this, a new system really starts with Bitcoin to get people familiar with this. But isn't it ironic how a system that was created to combat, at least supposedly, the traditional financial system is being championed by those very people that run the system as it currently is? BlackRock's the biggest holder of Bitcoin today. Sorry, not BlackRock. All of the US ETFs combined. BlackRock's a part of that, and miners, etc.
Yeah. It's indeed. It's first of all, it's not coincidence. If people think that's a coincidence, they're not using good judgment and they're not paying attention, or they don't have enough information to put a clear picture to what's going on. Because it's not coincidence, it's mathematically impossible for that to be a coincidence. Interestingly, what you just said is that's a consolidation of power. So
just like
ultimately, you have they've done this historically. They create a problem. There's a reaction, and they already have the solution to the problem they created. And historically, if you really follow the money, which is something we do, you'll see that the people that created the mess in the first place make a ton of money cleaning it up. So it's always the same situation, just a different story. Now, yes, and also what you're talking about is it can be referred to as a private-public partnership. So a lot of times, governments or certain entities will receive a lot of negative scrutiny by the public. This is very common throughout history. If they're getting too much power, they receive a lot of scrutiny from the public, and a way to mitigate that and fly under the radar is by setting up or funding private entities to do what the government wants to really do. It's a private-public partnership, and there's a phenomenal journalist named Whitney Webb who talks a lot about this and breaks it down. But this has been going on for a long time, but it's becoming more known now, thanks to the internet and the ability for us to, research on information and share information. But that's exactly what's taking place, and crypto is playing a very big role in that aspect. For the banking system, as we said previously, historically, if we look at history, I like to use history as a roadmap because, as Mark Twain says, it doesn't always repeat, but it often rhymes. And that's absolutely true. And historically, all economies, empires, currencies, systems come to an end. And the monetary system that we currently have is a fraud Ponzi scheme. It's literally the definition of a Ponzi scheme. And it has nothing backing it except confidence. That's it, confidence from the people. But if people really understood what was going on, the system would collapse overnight, literally. Now, technology, such as cryptocurrency and blockchain technology, this is a double-edged sword because it truly does have the ability and the power to shift the power to the people. And the architects of the system which indeed some of it comes from the private sector because innovation, technology is always adopted from the private sector, and then it goes to the government and the people in control. But it's a double-edged sword because it can give the power to the people, the Web 3.0, this whole concept. But at the same time, the central banks, the financial institutions, and the big players, they understand that if they don't control this, then it will be the end of their time. It really will. So in order to maintain that power and control this evolution, they have to really put their foot on the brakes. And this comes through regulations. That's one thing, because regulations is just another word for control. If something's regulated, whether it protects us or not, obviously it does in some senses, it's still controlled. So they do this through regulation, and then they do it through the adoption of this technology in a very strategical fashion. So with blockchain technology, yes, it has the power to literally eliminate the banking system. And that's why they're working with companies that bring the blockchain solutions. It's so that they do not get eliminated from the equation. It's not because they want the best for humanity. Obviously, they don't. Okay. This is elite bloodline families, aristocrats that have their hands in everything, and we're taking care of the people is not in their best interest. What is in their best interest is maintaining their power and control through the monetary system and innovation taking place.
Wow. Wow. Do you know, there's so much I can derive from all of that. It's like King Solomon said, there's nothing new under the sun. And we've seen
Very
these
true.
things. I loved what you spoke about, just going back to the last part where you spoke about markets and the psychology behind them and the narratives. And this is why I think me and you both have I guess, a bit of a love for technical analysis, because it helps us to perhaps spot what a trend might be or what the news might be before the news has broken. And we can relate that to XRP
Definitely.
and various things. But this is unbelievably fascinating. This is information that people need to know because they need to start questioning things. And when something doesn't add up like what we're looking at here, Bitcoin isn't, it's a shame really, because Web3 blockchains do have the capabilities to take away from them, cut them out as middlemen, and for us to just transact with one another without them. However, they've done everything they can to stop that. If you look at what happened with the XRP lawsuit, or the Ripple, Brad and Chris lawsuit, I should say, of course, XRP being the asset that was under scrutiny there, that was definitely deliberate. You spoke about sort of regulation. How do they, control this? They regulate it, harsh regulations. Why did they single what is probably one of the most impactful cryptos to come out of this industry ever out, specifically with a real world use case? And then, look at what they're doing with ETFs, with Bitcoin, and how the government themselves might not be doing it just yet, but they're strategically owning the lion's share of this space and owning the space through their large institutions. And it does bring up a million and one questions. So if Bitcoin perhaps is a distraction, and Bitcoin, anybody out there should definitely read Roger Ver's book, Hijacking Bitcoin. He speaks about how Bitcoin was essentially hijacked so that it could never scale to be a peer-to-peer currency and only deemed a store of value, and the block wars and things like that we won't go into. But if Bitcoin is the distraction, perhaps, what do you think is the thing that they're trying to distract you from?
Yeah, that's a very good question. So, starting back at Bitcoin, it was created in 2009. That's what we know. That's the public knowledge. And what's interesting is in 1988, David Schwartz, okay, he's the CTO of Ripple. He actually filed a remarkably similar patent to the distributed ledger technology. Fast forward to 1996, the NSA published a paper titled "How to Make a Mint: the Cryptography of Anonymous Electronic Cash." Now, why is this interesting? Because first of all, the NSA uses the encryption SHA-256 for the security of Bitcoin and its network. That's the That's the same encryption that the NSA uses. And it's interesting because that's what the same one for Bitcoin. And of course, we just talked about all the other events that took place. We had the 2008 financial crisis. 1 year later, 2009, Bitcoin's created. The United Nations talking about a new global currency against the US dollar. You have Bitcoin created. There's this whole narrative about Bitcoin being this store of value. So, from a distraction perspective, how would I view this as just somebody walking into the space, being extremely rational and logical, looking at all the pieces to the puzzle? I'd say, okay, this is what they want us to buy. And the truth is, if you get in very early, if you did get in early, you would make a killing. You'd make a fortune. And a lot of people did. But right now, Bitcoin's risen over 70 million% in the past decade. So what would they be distracting us from? Well, there's certainly so many different digital assets and cryptocurrencies out there. But I think what they're trying to distract people from, I think it serves multiple agendas. It's not just a distraction. I think that's one key aspect of it. But it's a distraction from utility digital assets that are actually going to serve a very critical role in the new financial system, which we're literally living through. It's some people think it's a flip of the switch overnight type thing. It could be, but not necessarily, because we're literally living through this evolution as we speak. Certainly, there will be events along the way that accelerate the process. For example, 2020, perfect scenario, if you want everybody to go digital and adopt a new system, well, you certainly have to get people to stop using cash. 2020 did that in a remarkable way. I mean, they simultaneously achieved multiple agendas, okay? Not to get off topic here, but one of the main ones, besides dropping the fertility rate and all kinds of other issues, was getting people to fear using cash, okay? You had a significant drop in cash usage around the world. And as you could see, slowly, gradually over the past 4 years, certain nations are putting limits on cash. So it's going in that direction. So we're literally living through the financial reset as we speak. Now, yes, why would they want to distract us? Because they never have the people's best interests at heart. Okay. They can't tell everybody we're going to have multiple new world reserve currencies. Okay. They can't tell everybody your currency, your fiat currency is going to continue to devalue until it could barely buy you anything. We're living through that right now. So they're never going to tell people and divulge exactly what's taking place. They have to keep us distracted. And for people that are interested in this space, that are looking for a way out, they're coming into crypto. And the first place they want to direct most people to is Bitcoin. So this is a very strategic diversion to put the eyes on Bitcoin as opposed to a lot of the utility digital assets that are going to play a critical role. And they'll play a critical role because their networks, their blockchain, their superior capabilities for the problems they're solving are at the peak. They're superior in the solutions they're providing to existing problems. And that's a big deal. So you can't have everybody in the world flock to the gem, So they have to control this in a controlled fashion. And the way to do it is by doing what they've done throughout history. They lie to you, they distract you, they divert your attention, look here, not there, as my brother always says. And it's very true. So right now there's quite a few digital assets that are, remarkably superior in the solutions they're creating for this new system.
Yeah.
And it's no coincidence that they're working with the big hedge funds, with the central banks, with the biggest entities that pretty much run the monetary system. That's something we could go into as well. But that's not a coincidence. This is by design. I think
Yeah.
it's very obvious.
Yeah, absolutely. And it is very interesting as well, and telling actually that if you look at how Bitcoin has been innovating itself into the system, it really hasn't been, certainly in regards to using this technology for the problems that it could solve. Whereas if you look at something like, we're going to come on to XRP or XLM or HBAR or some of these other um, projects out there, I really do have to pinch myself when I do my research on these projects and I find out just who's working with them. Because you kind of go, hang on. I mean, just the other day, I can't remember if it was on CNBC or Fox, but there was an individual talking about how, was it 100% of Bank of America's in-house transactions were ran by Ripple. I don't know whether it was specifically on XRP, but there was something that came out about that just the other day. That's just a very small example of probably hundreds of partnerships or proof of concepts or things that are going on with some of these utility tokens. As you say, did you see that, by the way, Vandal, about the Bank of America?
Yes, I did. And the funny thing is, that's just what they're willing to reveal.
This is it.
You know, they're always taking action behind the scenes. Decisions are made in the courtrooms behind closed doors, sometimes years, a decade in advance. That's just when they decided to release it to the public. So this has been going on for a long time, but that's what they want to give us, you know?
Yep. Yep. I think that's a great point,
Yeah.
actually, that you raised there that I missed. They're giving you that. You know, there's a lot more that people like yourself have been revealing for years upon years now. And actually, as we're talking about XRP, I want to start with where XRP came from, because there's a lot I'm not 100% clued up myself. There's rumors that OpenCoin, which was headed up or at least invested in by Peter Thiel's his founders foundation or something. Um, that's how Ripple started its life out. Obviously, Peter Thiel is part of the PayPal mafia. There's Elon Musk involvement. I don't really know that much about it. I have looked into it briefly, but it's a subject that I really want to get into with you in regards to, now we're talking about Bitcoin, the distraction. There are actual cryptos, we'll call them. I'm not sure how I feel about the word crypto, but it's what we've ended up with, so we'll use it. There are utility tokens out there that we're being distracted from. I think XRP is certainly, as a ledger, one of them. Ripple as a company, we're going to see so many interesting things. They've still got to IPO, et cetera, et cetera. But where did this technology come from? Which, of course, was introduced to us after Bitcoin. 2012, I believe, was the introduction. I could be wrong on that.
You're right.
Okay.
The creator of Ripple was Ryan Ruger. Okay. And it later evolved under Chris Larson and Jed McCaleb. So it was originally created by Ryan Ruger, and it was called OpenCoin. Then it evolved to Ripple, Ripple Labs, excuse me. And this was under Jed McCaleb and Chris Larson. And what's interesting is when we zoom out and take a step back and really follow the money here. So Peter Thiel, okay, somebody from the PayPal mafia. There was a lot of these guys, okay, but we'll just focus on Peter Thiel. He's a billionaire tech oligarch, okay? This guy has his hands in everything if you follow the money, and that's only what we're allowed to see, what's public. So he was an early Ripple backer, okay? He actually invested in Ripple he had the Founders Fund. So the Founders Fund, which was from Peter Thiel, that invested in Ripple in their early days. So that's a direct connection right there to Peter Thiel. They invested in Ripple. Interestingly, Peter Thiel he was the co-founder of Palantir technology data company. Interestingly, Palantir received early funding from the CIA's In-Q-Tel, which is the CIA's venture arm, basically. So you see the connections there already, pretty interesting.
Yeah, so I was going to say, actually, that's another kind of potential government involvement along with the NSA, which, of course, David Schwartz came from. But we can maybe cover that a bit later. Sorry to interrupt your sort of flow of thought there,
Yeah.
Vandal.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah. So, yeah. And as we said, in 1988, David Schwartz filed a patent very similar to the distributed ledger technology. And interestingly, in 1996, the NSA published the paper of how to make a mint. But David Schwartz actually did contract work for the NSA. So the chief technological officer of Ripple worked for the NSA. And the NSA works with the CIA and the intelligence agencies and Mossad, and the list goes on. So there's a direct connection there straight to Ripple. And he's one of the, I wouldn't say puppets, but he's one of the faces that gets a lot of media attention. He's very intelligent. There's no doubt about that. But he's out there. And diving even deeper, Andreessen Horowitz, which is a venture capital firm, okay, they were an early Ripple investor. Now, what's interesting about them is Andreessen Horowitz, the venture capital firm that invested in Ripple in the early days, this is public information. They have very strong government contract ties to intelligence agencies and defense contracts as well. So that's another direct connection there. It's also very interesting because Ripple actually received a huge funding from a firm like Google Ventures that has very strong government ties as well.
Wow, because
Google Ventures.
they
Mhm.
do use technology companies. I would say one of the reasons that America is the superpower that it is because of its technology companies. That they ultimately, oftentimes you'll find, and I know you're a fan of Whitney Webb as well. She's done some
Mhm.
unbelievable work on sort of digging into how a lot of these, like Facebook, for example, there's a movie made about the sort of founding of it and all this stuff, whereas actually you find out the opposite is true and there was government involvement.
Exactly.
And
Mhm.
this is technology. And if this technology is going to be as impactful or was deliberately introduced to us to be as impactful as we believe it's going to be, um, there's no way that the government, we often see these people in the government and we just think, wow, they're so stupid, we could do a better job. It's deliberate that they want you to think that whilst they're
Exactly. They do.
tinkering around. Yeah, I don't know if you have anything sort of more to go on with that whole segment because this is fascinating.
Yes, yes. So interestingly, is they always want to paint the picture that they're dumb and they don't know what they're doing and they're trying to figure it out. I mean, even the Federal Reserve does this all the time. They know exactly what they're doing, okay? And I hate to give them credit, but we underestimate their intelligence, okay, and the games they play. Unfortunately, that's just a fact, and to deny that would be very naive. Um, but yes, what's interesting is, as we were saying, Google Ventures actually invested in Ripple. They funded them. And they have very strong government ties and to the intelligence agencies as well. And as you were saying, Rupert, Facebook receiving funding, this is the private public partnership that we talked about. What is Facebook? Social media platform. But what do you have to do? You know, you upload your identity, you upload your pictures, your information. It's literally an AI database of its own that collects every single detail about your entire life. It probably knows more about you than you do about yourself. And it was funded by the intelligence agencies. That is a private public partnership. And what was that for? Yes, the whole concept, the business model is so people can interact all around the world. It's a social media platform, but it's very interesting because um, it knows everything about you. They know everything about you, and you're willing to give that information up because it's a private company. But if it was a government entity, nobody in the world would, you know, use that platform. Because people value their privacy. There might be a few people that wouldn't care, but the majority of people wouldn't be interested in that. But the fact that it's a private company, it's called Facebook, it's called Meta, that changes the whole perspective that people have on it now. Now it's just a social media platform. This is strategic. It's a private public partnership. And I don't see them doing any different with a lot of these digital asset and crypto companies, to be frank. They're doing it with Palantir for data. And actually, the co-founder of Palantir is Peter Thiel. and they work with the NSA, the FBI, the CIA, Mossad, other intelligence agencies. So the connections are all right there in plain sight. But even more interesting, speaking of Ripple, by the way, I am an investor, a holder of XRP. I believe the technology is going to bring immense wealth to people that own the technology and potentially give you opportunities in the future that you wouldn't have had otherwise if you don't own the technology. So I believe there's tremendous opportunity there. So I do own XRP. But Catherine Austin Fitts actually, she claimed, well, she was very interesting Secretary of State for housing. Yes. Now, what's interesting about Catherine Austin Fitts is she actually in 2020 she made a video and a public statement claiming that the U.S. Navy, there was a U.S. Navy firm that was that funded this firm in Denmark, and they were developing a Ripple compatible chip. But what's interesting about that is after that, she never made any comments on that ever again. And her credibility is tremendous. So it's very unusual. I don't think she would be making that up for no reason. And
Let's
that just disappeared.
let's segue because a little bit, and then we'll come back to the sort of flow of things. Because you know, Vandal, this information is vital that people know about. If you're not already following Vandal, there's links to all his socials in the description. Also, get on board with Black Swan Capitalist. It's very interesting, all the things that's coming out about Facebook right now, for example, and how they were mandated by government to censor certain things. Perhaps Biden's son's laptop, or some of the things that took place March 2020 onwards. There's a clear public-private relationship there. Not just we're picking on Facebook, but you'll tend to find that's with all of the big ones. That same DNA or the same footprints are here in the cryptocurrency space. And I think what we're trying to do is work out where those footprints lead us to. And XRP is absolutely that. You also mentioned very interestingly about social media. Crypto, social media, AI is creating this new kind of, as Whitney Webb would perhaps call it, digital prison, where we talk about these crazy things that aren't so crazy, like social credit scores, CBD. There's just so much that we're kind of, and we could do a video on each and every one of these, but I really want to stick to the topic of Bitcoin's the distraction. Where is the utility and innovation with all of this, and what should you be paying attention to? And there's clear sort of interferings with Ripple and its founding and potential, what would you call them, plants involved in that, perhaps. There's a lot of people out there that might be watching this and not know what Ripple is, and of course what XRP is. Maybe we could just take a step back and just give that big overview and relate that to some of the problems with the traditional financial system that you'll know all too well, and how it's useful for all of that.
So Ripple is a technology company, essentially. And it's a technology payments company. So what they're doing is they have a network, which is the blockchain technology, distributed ledger technology. And they have a currency, which is their native token. So Ripple is a company, XRP is their native token. XRP is designed and supposed to serve as a bridge currency. So previously in the initial part of our discussion, we talked about how the banking system's outdated, too many middlemen, too much pre-funding, it's slow, it takes days to send money, it costs dollars instead of pennies. Well, that's the friction we talk about. So with XRP, it acts as that bridge currency to move value, to move money from A to Z. And essentially, it's just an updated version on the blockchain technology of moving value. So that's essentially what they're doing. But yes, Ripple is a technology and payments company that has XRP to move value. It's basically a financial instrument to move value from A to Z. Now, what's interesting about Ripple, though, not to go too off track here, Trump nominated Brian Brooks to serve as the acting comptroller of currency. Brian Brooks actually was on the board of directors of Ripple. So there was a direct connection to Trump many years ago already through Brian Brooks. Interestingly, Rosie Rios, she was the 43rd treasurer of the Treasury Department. Now she's on the board of Ripple, and she's made public statements that I like Ripple because it's the only technology that's actually doing something. Okay, in essence, doing something important. Now, what's interesting about Rosie Rios is she's the 43rd U.S. treasurer of the Treasury Department. People are like, who is that? It's just some abstract thing, you know? Well, on I think it's every $100 bill or even some $20 bills, her name is actually on the currency. And she left the Treasury Department to join Ripple. So Ripple, creating this new system to move value. Obviously, it's a currency. And then you have a lady that was the 43rd treasurer from the government go to join Ripple. Now, what's interesting about that, even more interesting, is when I discovered this many years ago, I did some due diligence. I wanted to know, okay, what's Rosie Rios? What's her background? Who is she really? What is her title? What does she do? So I went on her LinkedIn profile, and her title was currency designer in her description. It
Wow.
said currency designer. Yeah, it's no longer there, of course, but that's what I saw when I was doing my research on her. So she is a currency designer, and then she goes to join Ripple. So they're clearly building something very big. And these individuals like Brian Brooks, Rosie Rios, there are several others as well. They wouldn't just join any company and put their entire credibility and reputation on the line if that company or entity wasn't building something very big
And
and going to succeed. Mhm.
and we think we know what they're potentially building. I think I was just earlier today. I was listening to an old clip of Brad Garlinghouse talking about TCP and how we have standard protocols that essentially enable the internet of information, which is what we're communicating on right now, to work. One way I look at XRP, I'm not sure if XRP will be the only one. I do think XLM, and we could do an entire
I
video
agree.
on that as well.
Mhm.
There's some very interesting things going on with XLM also. Obviously, Jed McCaleb, he was one of the founders of Ripple, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. There's some space companies
Mhm.
and stuff going on there, whatever.
Yes.
But we think we know what they're building. And TCP, and I can't remember what the other one is, are two standards that are fundamental to the Internet of Information. XRP, I believe, is going to be fundamental to that Internet of Value that is being it's here before us. We're going through a reset right now, and actually,
Mhm.
there's massive opportunity in that. Of course, we've spoken about that a little bit, but what we're seeing is the fact that there's clear links with the people who are already in control of the system now ushering in this new one with these private-public sort of relationships or public-private relationships, and it is very
Yeah. Yeah.
interesting. Everybody who's anybody kind of coming over to Ripple. We've spoken about a few people that work for Ripple, but there's loads and there's loads of partnerships and there's all these. We're really just scratching the surface and uncovering some big things, but there's so many of them. It's kind of hard to keep up, you know.
Yeah. And even, for example, Elon Musk. This is a very interesting connection. Yeah, it's so abstract, when you try to really connect the dots here, but I think it's very obvious. So Elon Musk in 1999, he founded X.com. Okay. This was supposed to be the first banking payment system, online banking. So he created that in 1999. And then later, it evolved into PayPal with Peter Thiel. Okay. Now, what's interesting about that is, as you said previously, he loves the word X. Okay. I think his kid's name is X. He turned this Twitter into X. He started X.com, and then you tie that into XRP. He has direct connections to Ripple through his partnership with Peter Thiel that had the Founders Fund that invested in Ripple, and then all these billionaire tech oligarchs that are connected to him, that are connected to Ripple. And it's interesting because um, where I was going with that is that Elon Musk was asked about the XRP ledger's implementation in the new financial system. He was asked that at one of these rallies, you know. I don't know if you ever saw that. There was a
No,
video on it. Somebody
no,
asked
no.
him. Okay, yeah. Yeah, you can I'll send it to you or you could find it.
Sure. Yeah, yeah.
But
We'll fish that
somebody
out.
asked him publicly about Ripple, and Elon Musk actually, very interestingly, he declined to comment, and he basically said that I'm not going to comment on it, or he's not going to say anything about it, negative or positive, basically. But what's very interesting about that is not his body language. That's a whole other subject. But the fact that he always comments on Bitcoin and Dogecoin, but he said he couldn't comment on XRP. That says a lot.
That says a hell of a lot.
Looking at it, that says a hell of a lot. Yes, absolutely. And this is a video of it. So he was asked about it publicly.
Wow.
And you see his response. It's very interesting.
It-
But not just the way he responded, but what he said. He can't comment on it. And yeah, he always comments on Dogecoin and Bitcoin.
And I think one thing that you should consider right now is, do you really think Elon Musk doesn't know anything about XRP? Certainly, given what's
I think,
happening with Trump, he, of course, and the
of
X is
course.
very interesting. There's also all this, there was a video, I'm sure you've seen it, of Peter Thiel. When was it? It was back in 1999, talking about the future of payments. And he's talking about how actually you'll be able to fractionalize the S&P, for example, and use that as a payment, or use debt as a payment, which we know they're doing with stable coins and money market funds
Yep.
and things like this. And it's very interesting how we're at a point in 2025 where somebody who's creating a system that can do all of that, that has clear or the lineage of that company, and thus the ledger has clear links to those individuals that prophesized all this. And now you've got Brad Garlinghouse in the White House with Trump and Stewart. It just kind of, again, coincidences are often not coincidences. And that's what we're trying to uncover here and kind of give the big picture of what's going on. Because people are lost in it's all about Doge or Melania Trump or whatever. No, there's something fundamental going on here. And do you think there's an opportunity in that, Vandal? You said you're an XRP holder. I'm an XRP holder as well. Do you think there's opportunity
Yes.
for all this, and how? And if you can talk about maybe how you exploit that a little bit. Of course, if you want the real deal, guys, go to Black Swan Capitalist. But maybe we can talk about that a little bit.
Absolutely. First of all, that's a very good thing you brought up because I have to start here. There is plenty of opportunity to invest or own these cryptocurrencies and digital assets because when you invest in them, we've been taught to believe for the longest time it's a scam. You're just buying a Donkey Kong token or just some coin, But when you buy these tokens, you're essentially owning a piece of the network. Okay. You're owning a piece of the network, and the value is in the protocols of that network. So that's how I like to look at it share that perspective for a complete beginner. That's how you have to view it. And the market is very diluted. We have too many cryptocurrencies, too many pump and dumps, Ponzi schemes, too many copycat technologies that are trying to do the same thing. And they're never going to succeed because some of these cryptocurrencies have been chosen long ago for a specific role. And that's why they're receiving huge funding from some entities like we just discussed, and there's other ones too. There's Stellar Foundation, XLM. There's SHX Stronghold. There's Algorand. There's Velo Labs that has the board of advisors is Jed McCaleb. You see, they're all connected. You just got to do the research, but the opportunity is immense here. And there's two plays that I would like to discuss here where there are phenomenal opportunities to really capitalize on this wealth transfer. First of all, buying these digital assets and cryptocurrencies at this stage right now, I think is almost equivalent to buying Amazon and these big tech companies in the early 90s before they really got mainstream and all the eyes were on them. So that's how early we are. And I like to do that comparison because I still think we're extremely early, But this is quantifiable. It's measurable. How? Because if you look at the rate of adoption for the internet from 1993 to the year 2000 and beyond, so we had approximately a little over 50% of the world's population adopting it. What's interesting, though, is the rate. It's called the S curve, the growth adoption taking place for blockchain and cryptocurrency. The rate of that adoption is happening faster in comparison to the internet. And look, we're still early. And how do you know we're very early? Because if you go to your neighbor and you ask them about crypto or blockchain, they think you're speaking a foreign language. That's how you know we're early. Because the internet or an Apple smartphone, we have mainstream adoption with that. And how do you know? Because everybody around you uses that technology. That's global mainstream adoption. And I think there are two layers to the mainstream adoption. There's the back end layer, which is financial institutions and companies and corporations utilizing it. That's already taking place. And then you have the second layer of global mainstream adoption. And that's when your grandmother is buying a coffee with a cryptocurrency, or your neighbor knows what crypto is. But we're not at that stage yet. And that's how you know we're at the infancy stages of this evolutionary cycle for blockchain and crypto. But the opportunities are here. We have the 4-year cycles where this is important, okay? There is a very fine distinction between utility and utility prices for these assets, and a very fine distinction between that and the crypto bull run or altcoin season that happens every 4 years. Very fine distinction. And a lot of times, these two are used in the same paragraph and sentence, and they should not be, because they're two different things. And the way to explain it is like this. When utility actually takes place, global mainstream adoption, applications, use case for these technologies, because these assets have a limited supply, that will result in a higher price reflected in these assets. It's supply and demand economics 101. That is inevitable at some point in the future, and we're getting there. We're on the path going that direction. That there are many pillars that will influence that, such as regulations, actual use case and adoption. You know, how much value is flowing through the network, whether it's debt, assets, equities, how much is flowing on the network. And as a result, all of that will determine and reflect the price that we see, because there's a limit on the supply. So it would be supply and demand at the end of the day, and that will reflect in the price. That's utility. And then there's the second play, that is the 4-year bull run cycles. Okay. Since 2009, all governments reset interest rates to near zero. This is very interesting. And that's when Bitcoin was created.
I know where you're going, please.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay. Well, ever since, and this is not an opinion, this is a fact. If you layer them together, ever since 2009, when they reset interest rates to near zero, coincidentally, Bitcoin was created. Every 4 years from that point on, we have had a crypto bull run. What's interesting about that, every time we have the crypto bull run, it happens to be the same time where the treasury debt needs to be refinanced. So it's no coincidence that every time they have to refinance the debt, you have a massive surge in crypto prices and you have a crypto bull run, which coincidentally happens to be 6 to 12 months after the Bitcoin halving. So a lot of people think the bull run is caused by the Bitcoin halving, but I'm telling you right now, it has very little to do with that. Yes, it cuts the rewards in half, it creates a supply shock, but that's not what sends all this capital into the crypto market. See, the crypto market is driven by one thing only. It's liquidity. Money going in, money coming out. That's why every 4 years you see a crypto bull run, typically the 4th year of every cycle. and then you see a massive crash afterwards. And who is that? That's not retail investors pulling out $100 that crashed the whole market. That's the insiders, the whales, the institutions, the hedge funds, the billionaires. They are cashing out of the market every 4 years. And that's why you get a significant crash and capital leaving the crypto market.
Yep.
And the ripple effect is created by people selling out of fear. That's the ripple effect, but that's not what starts it.
I knew you
So
were going
there's
to
this
take
fine
it there.
distinction.
I knew you were going to take it there. I've got to jump in, Vandall. I knew you were going to take it
Go
there.
ahead.
When you started on that, I thought, yep, I know where he's going. And you're absolutely spot on. This is something that's become apparent to me a little bit later on. The story is with the supply shock, there's a supply and demand equation, et cetera, et cetera. But isn't it very interesting, again, talking about that resetting, that the 4-year cycle perfectly coincides with global liquidity cycles. Some people will be familiar with cross-border capital. He's made global liquidity cycles very popular. There is a little bit of a debate on that whole thing. But you mentioned fundamentally what drives that with the debt. Also, go and look at PMI cycles in the US. They align with Bitcoin. Look at the stock market and how
Exactly.
that reacts. Look at election cycles and how they react, all driven by the one thing that you mentioned there fundamentally. And isn't it interesting that I often thought this? I don't really think Satoshi was one individual. I think it was we could another video entirely for us. But isn't it interesting that that halving was centered right around these kind of economic cycles, and it makes you think that he would have had a wonderful understanding of economics. But how could he be that intelligent and create a blockchain that was never, I'm not sure it was never designed to scale, but it was never sort of, it never, but the problem with Bitcoin is it can't scale. And that's why I need all these layer twos and things like this. So I love where you took that there, Vandall. Few people recognize actually that Bitcoin's cycle perfectly aligns with business cycles, economic cycles, all due to what you mentioned. Yeah. Sorry to interrupt you there, Vandall. I had to.
No, you're right. You're absolutely right. They all align with the boom and bust, the business cycles, the Bitcoin halving, the debt refinance cycle. It aligns with the elections. And what's interesting is ever since 2009, we've been on this 4-year cycle where every 4 years, the debt needs to get refinanced. And what does the government do? If you have to pay interest on previous debt, you need to get the money from somewhere. So you print the money out of thin air. And as a result, a lot of that capital makes its way to financial institutions and different entities and companies. And what they do with that capital is they put it in risk on assets. And so far, from money printing, the crypto and digital asset market is the most sensitive to money printing and the dilution of the increase in the money supply, global M2 money supply. So the way this functions is every 4 years, they need to refinance the debt. And in order to do that, they need to print money to refinance the debt. And that's why every 4 years, two things happen. The national debt always increases. It never gets paid. They only pay the interest so that they can keep the system going from collapsing. So they print money and they pay off the interest. But in order to print that money to pay off the interest, they increase their national debt. So the debt keeps growing and growing and growing and never gets taken care of. The only thing that gets taken care of is the interest payments. And this cycle continues every 4 years. And as a result, the second thing that happens is currency debasement. So the devaluation of your currency and your buying power. And you don't see it instantly. There's a lag. It takes 6 to 12 months before you see your grocery prices go up and your rent go up. There's a lag there. But the third thing that happens is asset prices go up. And very importantly to identify is that as a result of money printing and increasing the global M2 money supply, currency devaluation takes place. So you get poorer if you don't own assets. But asset prices go up at a different pace depending on the asset class. So there are different asset classes that react and have a different sensitivity to money printing. So far, the closest one, the most sensitive to money printing, is cryptocurrency and digital assets. That's why they're the best risk adjusted reward asset out there, which means the reward is substantial. And they increase so much from money printing and adding to the money supply. Whereas stocks, they also go up. All asset prices go up, but stocks have to take into account earnings too. Gold also goes up, but gold doesn't just go up from money printing. It goes up because investors flock to it as a hedge against inflation. So that's what drives gold up as well. Plus, it's manipulated from paper. That's a whole other subject. But yes, cryptocurrency has immense opportunity because every 4 years they have to refinance the debt. As a result, they print money. In order for them to afford the interest, they lower the interest rates. So we saw this in 2020. A lot of people don't know, but the market was actually crashing before they announced the whole thing, the event.
Yeah.
It was from the repo markets.
And they needed that,
and that was a cover up,
didn't they? They needed that liquidity because the reverse repo sort of clogged up, and they needed
exactly.
this.
Yep.
There's so many
and it
things,
made its way into the crypto.
there's so many things you can take away from what Vandell's just said there. I mean, I'm just even struggling where to go from this because there's so much we can actually get into. But I want to keep people focused on these opportunities. We've spoken about big time what's driving the crypto space. It's not necessarily the halving, it's the debt refinancing cycles. You can see that. You don't just need to take mine and Vandell's words for that. You can go and look yourself, overlay some of these cycles, global liquidity cycles, debt refinance cycles, PMIs, etc., and you'll see what we're saying. Now, that does also give you a little bit of a inkling that there's something bigger perhaps going on here with Bitcoin, and it's designed to capitalize off of these perhaps to the pot. But opportunities in the space. We spoke about why this space is such a great opportunity. I did see a Lynn Alden report actually on global liquidity and how Bitcoin's the most correlated to it. I thought that was a great report. All of that information is unbelievably useful, valuable, and you should really take all that on board. What cryptos do you look at? XRP, you're very, very public with, and we've spoken about why you're following the footprints in the sand. What other cryptos do you look at, Vandall? If you can just give a couple, you don't need to, or as many or as little as you want. You know, it's entirely up to you, because there's more out here that clearly have that seed in them, like XRP does, or Ripple being the company.
Yeah, absolutely. So XRP is one of the ones I really pay attention to, but outside that, XLM, which is stellar. I think they're serving a very critical role in the new financial system. I think they've been in stealth mode for a very, very long time. You know, nonprofit, this is by design. I don't think they want too much public attention. I mean, when you think of it in the grand scheme of things, crypto investors are such a small percentage of people in the entire world, let alone even smaller that own utility digital assets. So this is just part of the evolution. You have people that get in early in some assets and become wealthy, and then you have the majority of people that miss out and they figure it out, you know, a decade later. So yes, XLM and Stellar, Stellar, the company, XLM is their native token. Another one is Stronghold, which is SHX. That's their token.
This is a newer one to me. I'm not particularly familiar with Stronghold. There was a million and one reasons why I wanted you on. This is one of them as well.
Yeah, so they have some interesting ties to Ripple actually, and receive funding from Ripple. I think one of the developers that worked for Ripple has actually helped build Stronghold. SHX, which is Stronghold's native token. So they focus on payment and financial infrastructure. Very interesting stuff there, but immense opportunity, not from just a utility standpoint, because remember how we talked about there's two plays here. There's the 4-year cycle that you can capitalize on, and then there's utility, which is inevitably going to create a price shock for a lot of these assets at some point in the future. So there's immense opportunity in the short term for the 4-year cycle to, for the bull run. And then there's even more greater rewards from a long-term investing perspective by owning the assets for the long term when utility really manifests on a full scale. So yes, SHX, Stronghold, I think it's extremely undervalued. Excellent tokenomics. Another one is Velo.
I know you've been very
Not
public about
Velo,
Velo.
Jerome.
Yeah.
Yeah,
One of the few
Velo.
people I've seen.
Yeah, so they're, I think, very undervalued as well. That's the company is Velo Labs, and they're focused on primarily Asian markets, which is interesting because a lot of these digital assets and blockchain technology companies, a lot of people think, okay, I have to find one, which is the best, which one's going to conquer them all. And the new financial system we're moving towards is a multipolar financial system. Okay. There was a video that I shared a while ago where even the head of the Federal Reserve, Jerome Powell, publicly said, we could have multiple world reserve currencies. It's been done before. He said that.
I've seen it.
Now, whether he's telling you to your face what's coming or not, that's something for debate. I don't know. But he's telling you it's possible. And I certainly think it is in the direction we're moving. And that's what leveling the playing field is. A lot of people think it's
Yep.
leveling the playing field for you and I. No, it's leveling the playing field for financial institutions and nations for that interoperability. Level it for them because they're the ones in control anyway. So they need to level it for them. We could take advantage, instead of trying to fight the system. This is the system we live in, identify it, analyze it, assess it, and cultivate it to benefit you and your family. That's the perspective people need to have because I believe, being optimistic and hopeful is extremely important, but you have to be optimistic, hopeful, and realistic. Because if you're just hopeful, you're just walking into a burning house. But if you're realistic and hopeful, at least you're going into that burning house with a shield. You identify the threat and you cultivate it. And that applies to everything in life, especially investing in this new asset class. So Velo, in my opinion, very undervalued from a technical perspective, but also from a fundamental perspective. And Rupert, I just wanted to say, a lot of people think that from a sophisticated investor perspective, the best thing to do is invest in a company or a technology or a crypto that has strong fundamentals. And I want to say that's very important. But what's even more important is when you invest. And that's getting a cheap price too. Because you could have invested in the best companies in the late 60s, late 70s, and there was a big market crash which took place. So a lot of the investors that invested in, McDonald's and Walmart, yes, they're fundamentally strong companies, but you lost 90-80% of the value. So it's not just about fundamentals. Even more importantly, it's about getting a good price. So when you're investing. And that's why I feel like the best way to invest in these assets is try to find that balance between them. Because you could invest in the tokens that have the worst fundamentals and you can make a fortune.
Dogecoin.
Look at the Dogecoin. Yeah, perfect example. I mean, meme coins, all these other tokens. So it's not just about fundamentals. It's about price. You always want to get in at a good price, get in at the right time. And that's typically in a crash or a bear market for a lot of these utility digital assets. And Rupert, you already know this, but soon, at some point in the future, we will never see these prices again. So time is not on our side when it comes to taking advantage of the opportunity. It's a very small window because it's just a matter of time before regulations, adoptions come in, and the volatility that we see today will be a thing of the past. I mean, it still could be there in the future, but certainly we're never going to see some of these assets at extremely low prices in the future when that time comes. So
Wow.
I think Velo is very undervalued. SHX, XDC,
Yep.
they're focused on trade finance. Uh, HBAR, specifically HBAR, been talking about them for a long time,
Yeah.
and that's Hedera Hashgraph. Yeah, tokenization. I mean, I think at some point in the future, Ethereum will become irrelevant
Me
because
too.
everybody would go to HBAR.
Me too. Me too. I absolutely agree with you.
Really?
We share a lot of very similar thoughts on this whole thing. I mean, if you guys are stumbling across me, I hope this is the video you're stumbling across, and if you're stumbling across Vandal, I hope likewise, because what I want people to take away from this is just think about what's going on here. Try and spot those footprints, and also understand that time is against you. We are moving to an economic singularity, and all these technologies are going to usher that in. And once they've got that, we've all heard this whole New World Order, one world government, one world concept. Well, ladies and gentlemen, I certainly believe, and I'm sure perhaps maybe you agree with me, Vandal, we're hurtling towards that. And once it's here, it's going to be very hard to arbitrage your way out of that. And is that asking a little bit of a personal question now, Vandal, where your concept behind Black Swan Capitalist came from?
Yes, that's exactly it. So the concept and the philosophy is to capitalize on the eventual route that we're going down and black swan events. And I know we can't predict black swan events, but the concept and the idea is to take advantage of the opportunities that are in front of us so that we can improve the lives of our own and others. Ultimately, that's the best way to look at uh, things, especially in the direction the world is moving in, because there's going to be, and this will continue to happen. We will see um, events that take place. We will see crises. Unfortunately, it's just historically it always happens. Something happens. Um, and we need to be wise and take advantage of these opportunities so that we could better position ourselves and our families for the eventual world that we're moving into. Because I don't think it's in humanity's best interest. And to be completely frank with you, Rupert, I think more than 90% of the world doesn't understand where this is really going, to be honest with you. So we need to better position ourselves now in this short window, this small window we have, so that we will have more choices. We will have some opportunity to kind of live within our own means and still have some choices in this system we're moving towards. At the end of the day, it's about having more choices. And I feel like if you're positioned properly during this wealth transfer and this evolution, you will definitely have more choices in the future. And nobody has a crystal ball. We can't tell how it's going to completely manifest or be for all of us tomorrow. We can certainly hope it's not as bad as the dystopian picture that's painted, but we have to be realistic. And I think if you're unrealistic about that because you intend on being very hopeful, which is a positive trait, but you're going to set yourself up for failure and be very disappointed. So you have to have a very realistic, strategic, and practical approach. And that's really our mission, to try to shed light on the dark corners of the economy and, share wisdom and experience that we've accumulated over the years so that people can really, be prepared and take advantage of the situation.
This is personal for you, isn't it?
It is. Yeah.
Yep. And we love that.
What?
And that's why we wanted you on this show, because I think that emanates, when I listen to you speak, when I look at some of your takes on Twitter and things like this, I can see there's a genuine desire to help people in what's coming that most people don't quite realize. And, I don't want to turn, and we're going to have to get you on for multiple other interviews, I'm sure, Vandal, because there's so many areas we could, just one of the things we've spoken about, we could do an entire video on. But there's something pretty serious coming that is very Orwellian, I think. That's my base case, even though I am optimistic. And it's opportunities like these that we're talking about that present themselves that might be able to help you escape some of that. Maybe all of it, maybe not. We'll see, but you might as well try. There's that great saying out there that it's better to live on your feet than die on your knees.
You have a fighting chance, exactly.
Absolutely.
But it's all based on the actions you take. The actions we take today will determine our future tomorrow, you know?
Absolutely.
And
Absolutely.
the traditional methods of investing, traditional strategies, they don't work anymore, Rupert.
Yep.
You know, we have to evolve as the space evolves and evolve our tactics as well.
Yep. I mean, the sort of returns you get on, average investment strategies, you look at them and maybe it's because we're all kind of desensitized to that in crypto, but you kind of think you're barely keeping up with inflation plus it's a world that's rigged against you. And that to some
Mhm.
people topples them over, but the opposite should be true. You should actually see it as a challenge to overcome. And it's people like Vandall, what we do here at All in Crypto, we think through markets you can arbitrage your situation and not just better your lives, but something more important than that, your families. So, Vandall, we're going to leave links to absolutely everywhere people can find you. Quickly, is there anywhere you want to direct people? There will be links in the description to all of this.
Yeah, thank you very much, Rupert. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Likewise.
Love speaking with you. You are a brilliant human being, brother. So thank you. But yes, you can visit our website at blackswancapitalist.io. You could find me on Twitter. I'm very active there. It's Vandale33. And I have the personal YouTube channel as well. It's my name, Vandale33. So I'm very active on there as well. Try to put out a video, trying to keep up with Rupert. So yes,
Yeah, it's easier said than done at times, isn't it? But guys,
very challenging.
please go and check Vandall out. It's been an absolute pleasure to have you on the show, Vandall, and I think we'd really like to continue an open invitation and have you on a lot more to talk about some of these topics. We've got in depth into quite a lot of different things, but actually, there's so much more that we can uncover together that Vandall can share with us. We're going to have you back on the show, Vandall. So would you come back on?
I would absolutely love to. Everything has been more than pleasant with you here today. So thank you so much, Rupert. I'd definitely be willing to come back on. You just let me know.
There we go. There's a public agreement there. So Vandall, on that note, I'm going to love and leave you, pal. Really appreciate you coming on. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Rupert. Talk to you soon.